Senior Iranian general was killed in Syria. Tehran announced a strong response. Senior Iranian commander killed in Syria after Israeli airstrike. The U.S. continues to intercept Houthi missiles about to be launched. Protesters in Tel Aviv calling for the release of hostages and holding elections. The U.S. continues to airstrikes on Houthi missiles that are about to be launched. On January 20th, the U.S. military attacked a Houthi anti-ship missile that was about to be launched into the Gulf of Aden. The U.S. determined the missile posed a threat to U.S. merchant ships and naval vessels in the area, then attacked and destroyed the missile in self-defense, Central Command, CENTCOM, stated on X, Twitter. CENTCOM added that this is the latest incident amid rising tensions in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, which are disrupting global trade and raising concerns about supply bottlenecks. A few hours earlier, on late January 19, CENTCOM launched attacks against 3 Houthi anti-ship missiles that they believed were preparing to launch into the southern Red Sea. Since last week, the U.S. has launched attacks on Houthi targets in Yemen and this week returned the rebel force to its list of terrorist groups. American personnel suffered minor injuries in an attack on Iraq's Ain al-Assad airbase. The attack took place on January 20. The Ain al-Assad base was said to be hit by a ballistic missile. 2 security sources in Iraq and a government source told Reuters news agency that the base was attacked by multiple missiles fired from inside Iraq. Since the Israel-Hamas conflict began in October 2023, U.S. troops have been attacked at least 58 times in Iraq and another 83 times in Syria by Iran-backed militants. The attacks are often a combination of missiles and drones. The militants are seeking to force the U.S. to pay a price for supporting Israel against Hamas, which is backed by Iran. The U.S. has 900 troops in Syria and 2,500 troops in Iraq, with the mission of advising and supporting local forces to prevent the rise of the self-proclaimed Islamic State, IS seized large parts of both Iraq and Syria in 2014 before being defeated. Iraq is deeply concerned about becoming a battlefield between the U.S., Israel, and Iran. Saudi Arabia is concerned about tensions in the Red Sea. Saudi Arabia voiced concern that tit-for-tat attacks between the U.S. and Houthi could get out of control and escalate into regional conflict. "We are very worried. We are at a difficult and dangerous time in the region, and that is why we call for de-escalation," said Prince Faisal bin Farhan, who is also Saudi Arabia's foreign minister. With CNN, Saudi Arabia's foreign minister said the country believes in freedom of navigation and wants tensions in the region to ease. Houthi rebels, who control much of Yemen, said their attacks were intended to show solidarity with Palestinians under attack by Israel in Gaza. Iranian general killed in airstrike in Damascus. 5 members of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, were killed in an Israeli attack on a building in the Syrian capital Damascus on January 20. According to Reuters news agency, 3/5 of the above-mentioned people were described by Iranian state media using honorifics only used for generals, suggesting that the targets were high-ranking commanders. The remaining people included a major and a person of lower rank. Security sources said one of the generals was the head of the information department of the IRGC forces. Iran vowed to take revenge on Israel after the attack killed 5 IRGC members and an unknown number of Syrian army soldiers. A Reuters reporter at the scene said ambulances and fire trucks had gathered around the site of the attack. Rescue operations for people trapped under the rubble continued all day on January 20. A crane was mobilized to lift the concrete slabs out of the rubble. There was no comment from Israel, which has long carried out a bombing campaign targeting Iran's military and security presence in Syria. Israeli protesters protest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government. Thousands of protesters gathered in Tel Aviv to protest the government, accusing Prime Minister Netanyahu of mishandling national security issues and calling for new elections. The anti-government protests that shook Israel for much of 2023 ended after Hamas attacks in the south of the country on October 7, 2023. Political rifts were put aside as Israelis rallied behind the military and the families of those killed or held hostage by Hamas. But as the brutal war in Gaza enters its 4th month and public opinion polls show Netanyahu's support falling, calls for a change of leadership are growing stronger. stronger. This was reflected in the protest on the evening of January 20th in Tel Aviv's Central Square, where many protests took place last year. Although the crowd was much smaller than in 2023, there were still several thousand people, many of whom beat drums, shouted and waved national flags.